I am the digital inclusion lead for Connecting Cambridgeshire programme. It's a fairly new-ish role. It was kind of decided and then recruited for earlier in the year. I joined in summer. It's combined authority funded, so it works across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, with lots of the partner councils within there. We're hosted by Cambridgeshire County Council and part of Greater Cambridge Partnership as well. In terms of how today is going to look, over the past few months, I've been trying to understand how digital exclusion manifests across the combined authority area, what work has been done to date, and basically compile a state of digital inclusion report. That report is nearly complete at the moment, and then it will be going through kind of governance procedures. But this is part of the engagement that I wanted to do to sense check my findings, and get the involvement of lots of different stakeholders in how we develop a strategy for digital inclusion across the combined authority, and how we make sure that we're not duplicating efforts, how we make sure that everyone's involved and it's a kind of collaborative thing to partnership effort. So without further ado, we can have a bit of a look at what the programme entails. So the Connecting Cambridgeshire programme has 4 work streams, and that is broadband, mobile, smart, and access and inclusion. So my role sits within the access and inclusion work stream, and it has the aim of broadening access and the usage of digital and technology in a kind of broad sense. What that means is we're trying to ensure that people feel digitally included, so they have the right kind of physical access to connectivity and devices and skills and confidence support if that's what they need. They feel confident when using tech, they feel confident engaging with digital services, and overall, we want people to choose digital as a first port of call because it's easy and convenient and it benefits their lives in some way. So there's a lot of work to do within that, and we will be kind of exploring some of that as we go. Access and inclusion obviously fits into the wider programme because broadband is more focused on the kind of connectivity infrastructure, trying to get that ubiquitous, fast, reliable, future-proof connectivity in the ground across the whole of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. Similarly with mobile, getting that infrastructure out there, making sure people can access good quality 4G, 5G, and future iterations of mobile connectivity. Smart is about the kind of smart applications and uses of technology. So things like air quality monitors, flooding monitors, monitors and sensors in people's homes to help with things like damp, for example, or slip and fall monitors, all of those different kinds of things that can help make people more independent at home and help utilize technology in a smart way, and make sure that the council and all of its partners, or all partner councils and all of their partners rather, can operate efficiently and effectively. This is the Digital Nation 2023 infographic that has been released by Good Things Foundation, who are pretty much the biggest digital inclusion charity organisation in the UK. And there are some really interesting statistics here. So 1 in 14 UK households having no home internet access, I think, is staggering. And in the previous year's report, that was 1 in 20. So there's been a clear impact of the kind of continuing cost of living crisis and the way that that's kind of putting the pressure on lots of household bills, and broadband is potentially the first thing to go. So there's another statistic here as well that says 1 million households lost broadband access as a direct result of the cost of living crisis, while 77% of respondents believe that internet access is an essential need. So it's a shame that those numbers don't match up. If it's such an essential, if it is the kind of fourth utility as we talk about a lot when discussing digital and broadband, then it shouldn't be so difficult to access. People shouldn't be priced out of having access to this kind of essential connectivity. There's also some pretty shocking, although logical, but still quite shocking statistics here. So you are 12 times more likely to be a non-user of the internet if you're over 65. And for that same age group, you're 6 times more likely to be limited user. Your chances of being limited users go up if you're from a low-income household as well. So again, it's another part of the kind of poverty premium. You're missing out on connectivity, you're missing out on digital inclusion, you're missing out on all of the opportunities that brings as well. If you have disability or a health condition, you are twice as likely to not use the internet in any way. And with all of these indicators of digital exclusion, if you have more than one, if you represent if you represent more than one of these characteristics or demographics, then your likelihood of being a non-user or a limited user of the internet is further compounded, and you're further kind of excluded. Some of the benefits here of being online that these people are sadly missing out on: manual workers with high digital engagement can earn up to 5k more per year, which is obviously a really substantial amount. People with high digital engagement save £659 more a year, which is staggering, especially in the cost of living crisis, as we've been discussing. Over 3/4 of people saying that they're happier and healthier when they use the internet because it helps them connect, it helps them utilize things that can support the well-being. There are wider economic impacts. So for every £1 of investment, you can get £9.48 back in terms of wider economic impacts. And all of these things that are listed here, the Digital Inclusion Network, Device Bank and Data Bank, are offerings from the Good Things Foundation that can help people bridge the digital divide, and are resources that we are tapping into as well. So that's the national picture, but what does it look like more regionally? As I said, we work across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, so my research has been focused on that. 12% of the adult population of the combined authority area are classed as internet non-users by the Office for National Statistics. So that's quite a considerable proportion of people, and it means that not only are they missing out on those kind of monetary and financial benefits, they are missing out on opportunities for further education, the kind of softer side of things as well, the opportunities to socialize using the internet, the opportunity to find tools to support their well-being. And these are the group of people that we need to target more acutely, because they are at the sharp end of exclusion. We also found that there is a high proportion of older residents. So there are over 157,000 residents in the CPCA area that are over 65 years old, and that is expected to grow by a third by 2031. So we have quite a considerable aging population, and obviously, as we saw from the previous slide, being part of that age group really impacts your likelihood of being digitally excluded. So as we've got more people entering that age group within the next decade, we need to make sure that we're making them comfortable and confident with technology now, so that they can reap more benefits as they get older. They can benefit from kind of greater independence at home. They might have better interactions with GPs and things like that, for example, through remote consultations, etc., etc. And I think just it's important to pop in a cautionary note at this point as well, that although I am kind of evangelical about digital inclusion, it's not digital for the sake of it. It's not digital to replace any kind of human contact. I think it's really important that we maintain a strong balance between that. It's digital contact and socialization and the use of digital where it makes sense and where it makes life easier for the kind of the service will be under kind of budget pressures and things like that, and where it makes sense and it is easier and more convenient for the users as well. So when we think about GP appointments, that can be it can be really difficult to schedule. You have to think about traveling to them as well if you don't have your own car. You have to think about walk-ins on the day as well. Is your appointment going to be pushed back later and later? Is that going to align nicely with public transport if you're using that? It's the costs of getting there. All of these things where if it's something that could be replaced by a video consultation or something like that, it makes it a lot more easy and convenient for people to engage with it, and hopefully they will engage more frequently. We also found that there are 19 wards across the CPCA area with a high digital exclusion risk indicator score. So the digital exclusion risk indicator is a kind of consortium project. So one of the main partners was the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, and they created this tool which uses 12 different indicators, things like different indices of multiple deprivation, age groupings, levels of education, etc., to give a score of how likely you are to be at risk of digital exclusion. And obviously this isn't an exact science, but it's as close as possible for a kind of nationwide tool. And it's a really great starting point, I think, for any kind of investigation into where work should be targeted. So this was linked with high overall indices of multiple deprivation, education and adult skills scores, which, while there are vast areas where deprivation is low, education is high, adult skills are high, there are really concentrated areas and there are pockets across the whole of the Combined Authority, but the highest concentration of areas seem to be in northeast Cambridgeshire, particularly around Fenland and those kind of areas, and also in central and east Peterborough. So we have some maps within our report that kind of display this in a more visually friendly way, but I didn't want to overload with information today. This is just a kind of overview. And it's not all kind of negative for the Combined Authority area. There are also some real positives, which gives a great foundation to build upon. So there is near ubiquitous super fast broadband availability. So 98.3% of premises across the whole area can access at least 30 megabits per second. And there is also over 3/4 gigabit capable availability. Both of these figures are higher than the UK average and higher than most other areas across the UK, to be quite honest. And that is all from the great work that Connecting Cambridgeshire have done over the years. And this, as I say, gives us a great platform then to say, right, people have got that physical access to connectivity. What are the next pieces of the puzzle? How can we get people more digitally included? There is also pockets of great work going on. So the Cambridgeshire Digital Partnership, for example, that Sally and the rest of the CCVS look after, is a great network. There are other pockets and silos of great work happening across all of the kind of districts and cities. But I think what we have understood a real need for is supporting filling the gaps in provision, supporting resourcing what's happening already so that it can be sustainable and it can have some form of longevity, and developing a more coordinated response so that there is everything that's being delivered is delivered more efficiently. The gaps are clearer so that we can provide to fill those gaps, and we are kind of developing an environment of kind of sharing knowledge, sharing best practice, sharing lessons learned, so that we can mitigate any duplication of effort, we can mitigate any challenges, and we can really maximize opportunities. As I mentioned before, a lot of the research and things like that I've been doing, I've been compiling a state of digital inclusion report. Part of that has been to create recommendations for what a digital inclusion strategy and a kind of access and inclusion work stream on that combined authority level should look to achieve, and what the underlying principles should be. So I've tried to represent this quite nicely. So the pillars that we have here are what we're looking to achieve. So first of all, we've got community engagement. So tying into what everyone's already said, it's kind of intrinsic that we engage with communities, we understand what their needs are, we use the data as a jumping off point, as a starting point, to then paint to add color to the picture. So the data gives us the outline, and then the qualitative engagement gives us the color. What do people need? What do people want? How do they want it as well? How do they want to be supported? What type of language, what type of delivery? All of these different things are going to be so important in ensuring that people actually use whatever we deliver, and that it is fit for purpose. So that's one thing that's truly key. Another is convening a partnership network. So as Sally just said, and as everyone else has kind of touched on, there's lots of great stuff being delivered, whether it's on a kind of that hyper local basis that we've discussed, whether it's on a more kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry, gone blank. Anyway, whatever's being delivered by the partners, it's important that we understand what's going on so that we can help understand what resourcing is needed to support what's already being delivered, understand what gaps exist so that we can fill the gaps in provision, which obviously comes last on this slide, understand what audiences are already being engaged with and who we might need to do further engagement with, understand what works, understand what doesn't work, reduce duplication of effort, mitigate pitfalls, all of these things that I've already mentioned. Having a good, strong partnership network is going to help bolster that. And obviously, Cambridgeshire Digital Partnership is a great example of that. But with us operating on that combined authority level, we just need to work out a way of how we can broaden this to include all of the kind of partners and build on the great work that Sally and her colleagues have already done to create that. Another aspect is we want to enable social prescription. So we've talked about all of the different kind of uses of digital and things like that. It's pervasive of pretty much any kind of service that a typical resident will engage with. There will be some kind of digital aspect, whether that's downloading an app to park in, which will make it easier. They don't have to carry change, all of those things. They could use the NHS app to enable better health outcomes. They might want to check what bin day it is. So they, instead of calling council inquiries, they can go on the website. They might want to do online shopping if they're feeling a bit under the weather and don't want to go out. All of these different things. And there are lots of organisations that will have first-hand contact with residents that I don't have, that other people within the council don't have. So this social prescription model is trying to bring all the best parts of kind of partnership working and maximise their efficiency. So if a housing officer, for example, has contact with a resident and they are calling up to log repairs that need to happen in their council house, then that housing officer might refer this person to us with their consent to say this person would prefer to report things on an app or online, but they don't necessarily have the skills or they don't have a device, blah, blah, blah. Then a central team can triage what the needs of this individual are, and they will understand from being part of the partnership network, from knowing what's being delivered, who can support this individual, and where they need to be either referred, signposted, or if they need to be enrolled on direct support that's delivered from the council. We also want to make sure that digital inclusion is embedded and integrated into everything that the combined authority, county council, and all of the city and district councils do. So where there's an existing digital platform, it's about looking at kind of remedial work. So understanding why, if people aren't using the digital platform and they're using other forms instead, why is that? And how can we encourage people to use the digital platform to kind of save costs, make it more efficient, etc., etc. And that could also mean, sorry, that we need to change the platforms, because the platforms could be flawed. They might not be as inclusive or user-friendly or as accessible as they were supposed to be. So it's about making sure that it works for both parties. It also means putting in a gateway process early on. If there's some kind of service development or project development going on, there are statutory assessments that have to take place, like data protection impact assessments and equalities impact assessments. I want digital inclusion to be at least a part of that equality impact assessment, if not its own assessment. Understanding how the creation of this digital platform is going to affect digitally excluded residents, and making sure that user research takes place with people with limited digital skills, or indeed no internet skills at all, to make sure that it's fully usable, fully user-friendly, and also develop a kind of support arm to say, if this is being delivered to people who aren't quite digitally included yet, this is how we can help them use the platform. And finally, as I've said, we want to fill any gaps that are remaining in provision. So all of this kind of research and engagement should help us understand what is required, and then we can start looking for opportunities to find those resources, whether it's applying for funding from the combined authority, whether it's applying to central government, NHS pots, blah, 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 or even just supporting the application of other partners and not necessarily seeking funding ourselves, but bolstering those applications to ensure that there is provision for, well, in an ideal world, all needs and circumstances, but at least as many as possible. The underpinning principles that we want to have for this kind of strategy is to promote the better use of funding opportunities and social value delivery. So lobbying for more pots of funding, lobbying for less admin heavy funding streams to make it easier to apply for, to make it easier to use that funding, making sure businesses are delivering their social value commitments in ways that can benefit digital inclusion. And yeah, just trying to make sure, maximize the efficiency of resourcing really as far as we possibly can. We also want to promote innovation and collaboration and a focus on co-development and indeed co-delivery. So this is something that Luke mentioned, I think. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We don't want to come in and try and do everything on our own. It has to be partnership. It has to be delivered and developed together, because that's the best way to kind of tap into everyone's areas of expertise and knowledge and experience and all of those different things. We want to make the program, or continue the program's reputation of being easy to work with and having a real impact. We want to enable iterative and agile delivery and development of work with regular impact evaluations. So we don't want to front load lots of work with lots and lots of research. We want to centralize as much of the research as possible. So using the research that I've already done, using those kind of risk indicators and things like that to start delivery, and then with regular impact evaluations, understand what works, understand what doesn't, understand why it doesn't, and then iterate as we go. It will enable us to deliver faster. We can make mistakes and clean them up quickly. We can ensure that there is at least something being delivered that might help people as early as possible, as opposed to waiting and waiting and waiting and ignoring the good in search of the perfect. We want to help create an environment where residents and businesses choose digital. So we don't want to force people into digital. As I mentioned back at the start, it's not digital for the sake of it. It's not. Uh, it's not digital at all costs or at the cost of everything else. It's digital where it makes sense. And as we've discussed, digitalization is pervasive of life. And as budgets and cost saving pressures become more and more um, apparent in all kinds of service delivery, then digitalization is going to be one of the first tried and true methods that is used. So we want to make sure that people are choosing it in order to make their lives easier in the short, medium, and long term. And finally, we want to embed and integrate a kind of digital first mindset in the partner councils to the program. So this is similar to the pillar there that I mentioned before, but it's making sure that kind of digital inclusion is on the minds of people. It's making sure that all council staff can class themselves as being digitally included, have the skills to make their lives easier, make their work easier, utilizing things like Office 365 and all of those tools, um, and empowering them to maximize efficiency through the use of these tools, but also empowering them to kind of do whatever training feels comfortable for them. If they want to learn a new skill, then they can go and do it. And the hope is that this empowerment and this digital inclusion being at the front of your mind will then trickle down and benefit anyone who engages with the council and services, because it's that golden thread running through everything. These are my initial proposed next steps, and it should hopefully link in with all of the ideas that you guys come up with. So it's that kind of ongoing stakeholder engagement and further refinement of findings. So as I said, I've done the kind of the outline of the picture with the data, but doing that engagement and getting that qualitative understanding will add colour to that. Consultation and feedback. So continuing this type of dynamic where I'm bringing my findings to a group who have a kind of diverse range of experiences and knowledge and experiences with digitally excluded people, more importantly, and making sure that what I'm suggesting makes sense and is fit for purpose. It's not a waste of time. And again, we want that kind of agile delivery, so that's going to be an ongoing thing as well. Over the next 2 or 3 months into the early new year, what I really want to do is develop the digital inclusion strategy for Connecting Cambridgeshire. And that will be for kind of the initial delivery year of 24-25, because currently the Connecting Cambridgeshire programme, or the current strategy in its format now, goes up to March 25, and then obviously 2025 onwards will come as a byproduct of that. Go through the necessary approval processes internally, and then early next year, maybe like February, March time, look to launch that strategy with stakeholders, with partners, with anyone who can be involved. There will be that year of delivery, as I mentioned, with ongoing impact evaluation throughout that. And what I want to do in the new year 2025, up to that March date, is develop a first year kind of impact report. So comparing and contrasting with the report that I'm working on now, what has happened in that first year and what then needs to happen beyond. Please get in touch with any further questions, feedback, or ideas, because this truly does need to be a kind of partnership effort.